Snow fell over Duluth like a secret the sky couldn't keep anymore. It clung to the lampposts, to the frozen railings overlooking Lake Superior, to the cobblestones that wound down toward Main Street. Every sound was muffled, as if the whole town had decided to hold its breath for Christmas. In a cafe that smelled faintly of cinnamon and burnt espresso, a man sat alone by the window. His reflection ghosted in the glass. Grant Ellison had never liked winter. Once years ago, he used to build snow forts with his daughter Sophie in the backyard of their old house on London Road. But that was before the accident, before the silence. Now winter felt like punishment too, still too white, too full of memories that had no place to go. He stirred his coffee, though it had long gone cold. Across from him sat an empty chair. Sophie had loved that spot, legs swinging, fingers wrapped around a mug of hot chocolate, so big it made her giggle. She would have been 10 this Christmas. Grant stared at the chair until the world beyond it blurred. Outside, the snow thickened, curling through the streetlights in soft, swirling ribbons. The cafe was about to close. The barista, a college kid with tired eyes, offered a sympathetic nod as Grant pulled on his wool coat. He left a generous tip more out of habit than intention and stepped into the cold. The wind off the lake cut through him sharp and merciless. His scarf did little to help. He didn't hurry. He never did these days. His wealth could buy him warmth, comfort, anything except what he'd truly lost. The streets were empty, Christmas lights blinking behind frosted windows. Duluth felt like a postcard no one had mailed yet. Grant turned a corner toward the parking lot when his boot struck something soft. He stumbled forward, the coffee in his hand spilling onto the snow in a dark, steaming arc. He cursed under his breath and turned, then froze. Against the brick wall of the cafe, huddled in a tattered blanket, sat a little girl. Her knees were pulled to her chest, her hair tangled and dusted with snowflakes. In her lap, wrapped in a faded pink blanket, lay a baby. The child's face was pale lips trembling from the cold. The girl looked up at him with eyes too old for her small face. "Please," she said, her voice cracking in the frozen air. "I can't take care of her." Grant's breath caught. He stared, disbelieving, as if his mind refused to process what he was seeing. The baby gave a soft, rattling cough, and something in his chest tightened until he could hardly breathe. For a moment, he didn't see the girls at all. He saw Sophie, fragile, laughing, gone too soon. He crouched down, his knees sinking into the snow. "What's your name, sweetheart?" "Katie," she whispered. "And this is Emma, my sister." "How old are you?" "7," she said, clutching the baby tighter. "Emma's 10 months. Mom's sick. She doesn't wake up much." Grant looked up and down the empty street. No one. Not a single car passed, just the hiss of snow against brick. He pulled off his gloves and touched the baby's hand. It was ice cold. "You've been out here long, since this morning," Katie said. "The shelter was full. I thought the cold air might help her breathe better." Her words hit him like a blow. "The cold air," he repeated, unable to hide the tremor in his voice. "Honey, she's freezing." Katie's eyes filled, but she didn't cry. "Please don't call the police," she said, suddenly panic flashing across her face. "They'll take her away. I can't let them." Grant hesitated. His world was one of contracts, figures, steel and glass, decisions measured in profits, not heartbeats. But in that moment, none of it mattered. He was a father before he was anything else, even if the world had taken that title from him. He took a deep breath. "No police," he said softly. "Just warmth. I live nearby. You both can come with me just for tonight." Katie studied him, wary, small shoulders trembling beneath the blanket. Why, she asked. Because he said quietly, no child should have to take care of another in the snow. The words seemed to hang between them, visible in the mist of their breath. Slowly she nodded. Grant shrugged off his heavy wool coat and wrapped it around both girls. The fabric nearly swallowed them whole. He called a cab, his fingers shaking as he dialed. While they waited beneath the flickering streetlight, Katie leaned against the wall, eyelids drooping. The baby whimpered softly, then went still. Grant stood beside them, guarding them like fragile secrets he wasn't sure he deserved to keep. The cab arrived, headlights glowing through the snow. As they rode through the silent streets toward the hills overlooking Lake Superior, Grant glanced at the rearview mirror. Katie's head rested against the window, eyes half closed while the baby's tiny hand gripped the edge of his coat. Something inside him, something long frozen, shifted. He didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but for the first time in 3 years, Grant Ellison wasn't alone in the cold. The cab's headlights cut through the curtain of falling snow as it wound up the quiet hill toward the Ellison estate. From a distance, the house looked like something out of an architecture magazine, sleek lines of stone and glass perched above Lake Superior like a watchful guardian. To the people of Duluth, Grant Ellison's mansion was a symbol of wealth and success. To Grant, it had been little more than an expensive tomb. When the cab stopped at the iron gate, Grant hesitated for a heartbeat before keying in the code. The soft chime of the unlocking mechanism felt too loud in the silence. The driver glanced in the rearview mirror, eyes flicking from Grant to the bundled shapes beside him. Katie clutched Emma close, wary and silent. "You sure about this, mister?" the driver asked. Grant nodded. "Yeah, I'm sure." He paid the fare, stepped out into the cold, and opened the back door. The snow crunched beneath his boots. "Come on," he said gently, offering his hand. Katie slid out, clutching Emma so tightly the baby gave a small, sleepy whimper. When they reached the front steps, the automatic lights flickered on, bathing them in a soft golden glow. For a moment, the contrast between the storm outside and the warmth that spilled from the doorway was almost too much to bear. Inside, the house was silent, immaculate, and cold, in the way only empty homes can be. Every surface gleamed marble floors, walnut banisters, glass walls overlooking the lake, but there wasn't a photograph in sight. Not one trace of a life once lived here. Katie stopped just inside the threshold, her small boots dripping melted snow onto the polished floor. "It's really big," she whispered. Grant managed a faint smile, too big for one person. He led them into the den where a gas fireplace sat behind a glass panel. He flipped a switch and flames leapt to life, reflecting in the baby's half-open eyes. The warmth spread slowly through the room, chasing the chill from their skin. "Sit here," he said, motioning toward the couch. "I'll get some blankets." When he returned, Katie hadn't moved. She sat perched on the edge and arms tight around her sister, her eyes darting across the room as if waiting for someone to tell her it was all a trick. Grant knelt in front of her and handed over the thick wool blanket. "Here, this will help." "Thank you," she said softly, the words barely audible. He noticed her fingers, red-cracked, small. He wanted to ask 100 questions: where she came from, how long she'd been alone, what had happened to her mother. But the look in her eyes stopped him. She was holding herself together by threads. Tonight wasn't for questions. Tonight was for warmth. He brought them water, some crackers, and a cup of cocoa. Katie hesitated before accepting the cup. The first sip seemed to surprise her, and when she swallowed, her whole face relaxed just a little. "Emma likes warm milk," she murmured. "I think I can find that," Grant said, and disappeared into the kitchen. The fridge was nearly empty, except for bottled water and leftover takeout. He hadn't cooked since Sophie died. His hands shook slightly as he poured milk into a pot. The simple act felt foreign yet familiar, like something from another lifetime. The smell of heating milk filled the kitchen, soft and comforting. When he returned, Katie was staring into the flames. The baby had fallen asleep against her chest, her tiny breaths even and slow. Grant handed her the bottle. "Try this." Katie touched the tip to Emma's lips. The baby stirred and began to suck quietly. "She's really tired," Katie said, her voice trembling. "She's safe now," Grant replied. For a long moment, the only sound was the faint hum of the fireplace. Then Katie looked up. "You have kids?" The question hit him square in the chest. He swallowed hard. "I did," he said finally. "Her name was Sophie." Katie nodded as if she somehow understood. "Emma gets sick a lot. Mom says it's her lungs." Grant set the empty milk pot aside and crouched beside her. "Then we'll get her to a doctor in the morning, okay?" Katie's lip trembled. "Please don't call anyone who'll take her away." He met her gaze steadily. "I promise. No one's taking either of you anywhere tonight." She studied him for a long time, as if trying to decide whether promises meant anything anymore. Then she nodded, satisfied for now. Later, after he showed her the guest room, he brought out clean towels and a small pair of pajamas he found in the back of a drawer, Sophie's. He hesitated before handing them over, then told himself it was okay. Clothes were meant to be worn, not buried with ghosts. Katie changed quietly while he waited in the hallway. When she appeared again, the sleeves hung long past her wrists, but she smiled faintly. "They're soft." Grant's throat tightened. "Yeah," he said softly. They were someone's favorite. He tucked them into the bed, layering the blankets thick. Emma was already asleep beside her. The heat from the vent blew warm air into the small room. Katie's eyes fluttered. "Thank you," she whispered. He switched off the light. "You're safe here," he said, and meant it. Hours later, long after the house had gone quiet, Grant stood outside the door to a room he hadn't entered in years, Sophie's. The walls were still a soft blue, her toys lined neatly on a shelf, a pink scarf draped over the chair. The silence hit him like a wave. He stepped inside, running his hand along the edge of her desk. Dust clung to his fingers. For the first time in a long time, the emptiness felt different. Not just lonely, alive, somehow waiting. He looked back down the hall toward the faint light spilling from the guest room, where two small figures slept beneath his roof. Maybe tonight he thought the house on the hill wasn't a tomb anymore. Maybe it was beginning to remember what home felt like. Morning arrived in Duluth, gray and silent. Snowdrifts lined the sidewalks like frozen waves, and the lake beyond was hidden under a curtain of mist. Grant hadn't slept. He sat at the kitchen table, listening to the faint sound of breathing from the baby monitor beside him. Each fragile sigh reminded him why he hadn't turned away last night. When Katie woke, she looked startled at first, then relaxed when she saw Emma still sleeping soundly in the crib. Grant smiled gently. "Morning, you hungry?" She hesitated. "We don't usually eat breakfast." "Well," he said, "today we start." He cooked pancakes, something he hadn't done in years. The smell of butter and maple filled the quiet house. Katie watched him from the table, small hands folded in her lap. She ate slowly, like someone afraid it might disappear. Afterward, he knelt beside her. "Katie, where's your mom?" Her fork froze midair. "In the trailer park by the highway. Number 17, the blue one. She's sick. She sleeps a lot." "What kind of sick?" "She can't breathe sometimes. I tried to get her medicine, but they said, I'm too little." Grant's chest tightened. "Then we need to see her." Katie's eyes widened. "Please don't call the police." He met her gaze. "I won't. But if she's that sick, we have to help her." He called Mrs. Donnelly, asking her to watch the baby while he drove. "You sound like a man about to change his life again," she said softly. "Maybe this time I can change it for the better," he replied. The drive to the trailer park took them past frozen fields and shuttered shops. Duluth's charm faded quickly on the outskirts, houses smaller, colder, forgotten. Snow piled against rusted mailboxes and the sky hung low, heavy with gray. When they reached the park, Katie pointed. "There, the blue one." Grant parked beside a sagging porch draped in a torn tarp. The steps creaked under their weight. As soon as the door opened, a wave of cold air poured out, sharp with damp and rot. Inside was darker than he expected. The space smelled of mildew and something sour. Blankets were piled in a corner beside a broken heater. Then a faint sound, a cough, hoarse and weak. Grant followed it to the back, where a woman lay curled on a thin mattress. She was young, but her face looked decades older. Her lips were pale, her chest rising shallowly. "April Brooks?" he asked. Her eyes fluttered open. "Who? I'm Grant Ellison. I found your daughters last night. They're safe now, but you need help." She tried to sit up, failed. "Don't call anyone," she whispered. "They'll take them." Katie knelt beside her. "Mom, please." Grant crouched closer. "If we don't get you to a hospital, you won't make it through the night." April's gaze drifted toward her daughter, then back to him. "Promise you'll keep them together." "I promise," he said. That was enough. She nodded faintly, surrendering the fight. Grant wrapped her in the cleanest blanket he could find and lifted her in his arms. She weighed almost nothing. Katie followed silently, clutching the blanket around her shoulders. The drive back was quiet except for April's soft breathing. She drifted in and out, murmuring words Grant couldn't catch. When they reached St. Mary's Hospital, the automatic doors whooshed open, releasing a gust of sterile air. Nurses rushed forward, guiding April onto a gurney. Katie clung to Grant's coat. "Will she be okay?" "They're doing everything they can," he said. They waited in the emergency room for hours, surrounded by the hum of machines and muted voices. Emma slept in Katie's arms, Mrs. Donnelly had brought her from home as soon as she heard. Grant sat beside the girls, exhaustion heavy on his shoulders. Finally, a nurse approached. "She's stable for now," she said. "Severe pneumonia, but she's responding to oxygen. We'll keep her for observation." Katie's shoulders sagged with relief. Tears traced pale lines down her cheeks. Grant wrapped an arm around her. "You did the right thing," he whispered. "You saved her." Katie looked up at him. "Really?" He nodded, really. For a long time, neither spoke. The world outside had gone white again, snow falling in slow, quiet flakes against the hospital windows. Grant studied the two girls beside him, the small one fast asleep, the older one clinging to hope she didn't dare trust. Something in his chest cracked open a place he thought had frozen solid after Sophie's death. April Brooks had feared losing her children more than losing her life. And now, holding them close, Grant understood. He looked at the window at the storm that refused to stop and made a silent vow. Whatever came next, law's, rumors, judgment, he would not let these girls face the world alone. Not again. Snow returned to Duluth 2 days later, fine and steady, settling over rooftops like dust on forgotten memories. Inside St. Mary's Hospital, April Brooks slept under a web of tubes and soft beeping machines. Grant stood by the window, his reflection ghosting in the glass, the storm outside matching the one beginning to form in his mind. Katie and Emma were safe for now. Mrs. Donnelly had brought them warm clothes, books, and a little stuffed bear that once belonged to her own son. The nurses adored the girls, but every time Grant stepped into the pediatric wing, he could feel the curious glances. A millionaire businessman showing up every day for two children that weren't his people noticed. That morning, a woman in a tan coat introduced herself as Monica Alvarez from Child Protective Services. She was polite but cautious, with kind eyes that didn't miss a thing. "Mr. Ellison," she said, extending a hand. "I've been assigned to the Brooks case. I'd like to discuss temporary placement for the girls." "Placement," Grant repeated, uneasy. "Until their mother recovers. We just want to ensure stability." "They're with me," he said simply. Monica smiled gently. "That's very generous. But you understand, we can't make that official without evaluation. There are legal steps." "I understand steps," Grant replied, his tone tightening. "But they're not going anywhere." Her gaze softened. "I don't doubt your intentions, but others might." She left her card on the bedside table. Grant stared at it long after she'd gone, the words Child Welfare Division burning into his thoughts. That evening, he visited April again. She was awake, pale, but lucid. "They came, didn't they?" she asked. "Yes," he admitted. "They want to move the girls until you're better." Her eyes filled with panic. "You can't let them. I grew up in that system, Mr. Ellison. You don't come back from it." He rested a hand on hers. "I won't let them go." She squeezed weakly. "Promise me." "I promise," he said. That night, he called Ethan Park, his longtime attorney and friend. Ethan's voice came through calm and steady. "Guardianship is possible, but you'll need to move fast. If CPS thinks there's risk, they can take the kids within 24 hours. Then file whatever it takes," Grant said. "Grant," Ethan warned, "this isn't a headline you want. You're already under scrutiny with the library project. Gordon Pike's been stirring the pot." Grant frowned. "What's he saying?" "Whispers that you're using this charity stunt to polish your image before the city vote. A few reporters are sniffing around." Grant felt a cold weight settle in his stomach. Gordon Pike, the city councilman, with a smile too wide and pockets too deep. They'd clashed before over zoning permits. If Pike saw a way to ruin him, he'd take it. "Let him talk," Grant said finally. "We'll answer with truth." But truth, he soon learned, wasn't enough. 3 days later, a local paper ran a headline, "Millionaire Grant Ellison Rescues Homeless Children. A PR Miracle or Manipulation." The article quoted anonymous sources claiming his sudden generosity was an attempt to sway public opinion on the restoration contract for the Superior Library Project. Mrs. Donnelly read it aloud in disbelief. "How dare they?" she said, slamming the paper down. Grant rubbed his temples. "Pike's fingerprints are all over this." Katie overheard from the hallway. "Are we in trouble?" He knelt beside her. "No, sweetheart. You didn't do anything wrong." "Then why do people think you did?" she asked. He sighed, "Because sometimes people don't like good things when they don't understand them." That evening, Monica Alvarez arrived for an unscheduled visit. She looked tired, a stack of files clutched to her chest. "There's been pressure from the city," she admitted quietly. "Councilman Pike has raised concerns about your involvement." Grant's jaw tightened. "He doesn't care about these kids. He just wants my name dragged through the mud." "I believe you," Monica said, "but my department has rules. Unless there's a legal guardianship in place, I have to recommend temporary care." Ethan arrived minutes later, coat dusted with snow. Paperwork's filed, he announced, handing over a folder. Emergency guardianship petition, affidavits from the pediatrician, financial statements. Everything. Monica read quickly, her expression unreadable. You're serious about this? I don't make promises halfway, Grant said. She hesitated, then closed the folder. I'll suspend the transfer until the judge reviews this, but be ready for questions. People will test your motives. After she left, Ethan sighed. You know Pike won't stop. He'll dig deeper. Grant looked toward the living room where Katie sat reading to Emma by the fire, her voice soft and steady. Let him dig, he said quietly. I've already decided what kind of man I want to be. Later that night, the snow outside turned to sleet, tapping against the windows like restless fingers. Grant sat by the hearth laptop, open to an unfinished proposal for the library project. For years, his success had been measured in numbers, square footage, profit margins, architectural awards. Now 2 small girls asleep upstairs meant more than all of it combined. When his phone buzzed, it was a message from Gordon Pike himself. You're making this harder than it needs to be. Ellison, walk away from the contract and maybe I'll stop asking questions. Grant stared at the words until they blurred. Then he closed the phone, exhaled slowly and whispered to the fire. Not a chance, the headlines wouldn't stop. Every morning, another article, another photo of Grant Ellison standing beside the 2 girls he'd rescued, always framed like a publicity stunt. Philanthropy or performance, one read. Ellison's good deed raises ethical questions, said another. Reporters waited outside his office, cameras flashing whenever his car pulled up. For a man who had built empires on logic and control, Grant felt the world slipping from his grasp. He could handle attacks on his business. But this invasion into the fragile lives of Katie and Emma cut deeper than anything before. At home, he tried to keep the storm outside from touching the quiet warmth he had built. Katie went to school now, a private elementary a few blocks away. Emma was thriving, chubby-cheeked and curious, her laughter filling every corner of the house. Mrs. Donnelly often said the mansion finally sounded like it had a heartbeat again. But even in that comfort, Grant sensed the shadow growing. Gordon Pike had arranged a city council hearing about the Superior Library project. Officially, it was about budget transparency. Unofficially, it was a public ambush. Let him, Grant told Ethan one evening. If he wants a stage, I'll give him one. The day of the hearing, the council chamber was packed. Snow tracked in from 100 boots glistened on the marble floor. Reporters filled the back rows, cameras blinking like restless eyes. Pike sat at the center table, smile too bright, voice smooth as honey. Mr. Ellison, he began when Grant took the witness chair. You've been quite the public figure lately. Many are inspired by your compassion. Others question whether your sudden involvement with these children is coincidental, given your company's pending bid for the library restoration. Grant met his gaze. You mean to ask if saving 2 freezing children was part of my business strategy? A murmur rippled through the room. Pike raised an eyebrow. I'm saying perception matters. Some might call it manipulation of sympathy. Ethan leaned toward the microphone. Councilman Pike, with respect, my client has provided full transparency, financial records, contracts, even guardianship proceedings approved by the court. Pike waved a dismissive hand. Oh, of course. Still, the public has a right to clarity. Grant's patience thinned. Clarity, he repeated. Fine, let's have some. He pulled a folder from his briefcase and slid it across the table. Inside, you'll find payment records from the city's infrastructure fund directed to a shell company registered under your brother's name. That same company bid for the library contract last month. The room fell silent. Cameras clicked. Pike's smile faltered. This is outrageous. It's truth, Grant said evenly. And since you're so passionate about public transparency, I've forwarded copies to the Duluth Tribune and the district attorney's office. A sharp gasp cut through the crowd. The council chairwoman, startled, called for order. Pike's face drained of color. Grant stood buttoning his coat. You tried to paint my kindness as a lie, but the only thing false in this room is your integrity. He walked out to the cold applause that followed him down the hall. Reporters swarmed, but he didn't stop. He'd said what needed saying. That night back home, the house felt unusually still. Mrs. Donnelly sat in the living room knitting by the fire. Katie was upstairs drawing. Emma babbled softly in her playpen. Grant poured himself a cup of coffee, still in his suit tie, loosened. Did it work? Mrs. Donnelly asked without looking up. Pike's finished, he said. The papers will confirm it by morning. She smiled faintly. Then maybe the world will finally see you the way those girls do. He sank into the chair across from her, staring into the flames. How's that? Like a man worth trusting again. Later he climbed the stairs to check on Katie. She was asleep on her bed, a pencil still in her hand. Beside her drawing pad lay a picture of 4 stick figures under a yellow sun. One labeled Katie, another Emma. One mom, and the tallest one, simply home. Grant sat on the edge of the bed, emotion catching in his throat. He brushed a strand of hair from her face. You're safe now, he whispered. All of you. Down the hall, Emma stirred. He picked her up, rocking her gently the same way he used to hold Sophie. The ache that once lived inside him felt softer, now reshaped into something like peace. When the morning papers arrived, the headline wasn't about scandal or sympathy. It read, Councilman Pike resigns amid fraud allegations. Ellison cleared of wrongdoing. Below it, a photo showed Grant leaving City Hall, his hand resting lightly on Katie's shoulder. He didn't frame it or keep a copy. He didn't need to. That evening, as the first real light of spring touched the snow outside, Grant sat by the fire with both girls curled beside him. Emma tugged at his sleeve, demanding attention in baby babble. Katie leaned her head on his arm and whispered, Mom's getting better, right? She's stronger every day, he said. Katie nodded thoughtful. She said, you're the reason she's still fighting. Grant smiled faintly. Maybe. But you two are the reason I am. The fire crackled, shadows dancing across the walls that had once echoed with emptiness. Outside, the lake shimmered under the pale evening sun, thawing at last. For the first time since Sophie's death, Grant felt like he was standing in the middle of life again, not observing from its edges. He had lost one family, but maybe, just maybe, he was building another. And this time he vowed silently he wouldn't let go. Spring came to Duluth, quietly slipping beneath the melting snow and whispering through thawed branches. The lake that had once been a sheet of ice now shimmered like glass under the pale April sun. For the first time in months, Grant Ellison could open his windows and hear something other than silence. Birds' laughter, the faint echo of life returning. Inside the hospital, April Brooks lay with sunlight spilling across her blanket. Her eyes were open, soft but tired. Grant sat beside her bed, Katie perched on the chair next to him. Little Emma on his lap, gnawing at a toy. You came, April murmured, smiling faintly. Of course, Grant said. We brought your girls. Katie leaned forward, taking her mother's hand. You're getting better, right, Mom? April's lips trembled with the ghost of a smile. I'm trying, sweetheart. Her gaze moved to Grant. And you've done more than anyone had a right to ask. He shook his head. They saved me, April. You just gave me the chance. She studied him for a long moment, then whispered, Promise me one thing, if I can't stay, you'll keep them safe. Grant's voice caught. You don't need to ask. I do, she insisted softly. I need to hear it. He nodded. You have my word. A week later, April slipped away in her sleep, peaceful, unafraid. She was buried on a hill overlooking the lake, where the birch trees caught the wind like quiet prayers. The funeral was small, just Grant, Mrs. Donnelly, and the girls. Katie clutched his hand the entire time. Emma, too young to understand, pressed her face against his coat, babbling softly as if to fill the silence. When it was over, they drove home through soft rain. The world looked washed clean, ready for something new. 2 months later, in a wood-paneled courtroom, smelling faintly of lemon polish, the judge signed the final papers. Grant Ellison was now the legal father of Katie and Emma Brooks. Do you understand the responsibility you're assuming, the judge asked? Grant smiled gently. I do. And I accept it with all my heart. Katie squeezed his hand, her eyes shining with something like relief and joy. We did it, she whispered. Outside the courthouse, sunlight broke through the clouds. Grant lifted Emma into his arms, and Katie twirled in the puddles, her laughter ringing out across the stone steps. A photographer from the local paper snapped a picture, though this time Grant didn't mind. Some stories deserve to be told. That evening back home, he hung 2 photos on the wall. One of Sophie, his daughter lost too soon, and beside it, one from that morning, Katie holding Emma, both smiling, sunlight haloing their faces. 2 chapters of the same story joined by grace. Later, as dust settled, Grant sat by the fire with the girls curled against him. The house no longer echoed. It breathed. It lived. Katie looked up at him sleepily. Thank you for choosing us, she whispered. He kissed her forehead, voice low. You saved me first. Outside, the last of the snow melted into the earth, and somewhere beyond the window, the lake sighed under the weight of a new season. Grant closed his eyes, holding his daughters close, and let the peace he'd searched for finally find him. For the first time in years, he wasn't looking back. He was home. Today's story comes to an end, but its echo still lingers in the heart. What do you think? Give us a score from 1 to 10 and feel free to share a few words in the comments. Every voice here is valued and heard. Before you go, let me ask you gently, are you doing okay today? If your heart feels heavy, let this place be a quiet corner where you can share and find comfort. See you again in the next bedtime story, where love and hope remind us that no matter how dark the night may seem, kindness will always prevail.